They called my wedding a disgrace. My own parents. The people I once believed would walk me down the aisle, smile in the front row, maybe even cry a little. Instead, they sent me a message. We won't come. While I stood alone in white lace, they were somewhere off the coast of Catalina Island, raising champagne glasses on my sister's yacht. My mother laughed under the golden sunset, while I tried to smile under church lights. For years I told myself I was too grown to care. But in that moment, every uncelebrated birthday, every ignored award, every time they said Lily's name instead of mine, all came rushing back. I thought it would break me forever. But life has a funny way of flipping the script. Because while they toasted my humiliation, the cameras were already rolling live across the nation. The church in La Jolla smelled faintly of salt and lilies, the ocean air sneaking in through the open windows. The pews gleamed under the afternoon light, every detail, perfect, the ribbons, the candles, the pale roses I'd chosen myself. Yet all I could see was the row of empty seats in the front, the ones marked with gold calligraphy, reserved for the Henderson family. No one sat there, no father to offer a steady arm, no mother adjusting my veil, no sister waving proudly, only the absence of them sharp as a blade glinting against the beauty of the day. I gripped the bouquet tighter, feeling the stems press into my palms. The weight of silence filled the chapel. My heels clicked softly against the marble as I took my first step down the aisle. Each sound echoed too loudly, reminding me that the only family I had here were friends who had stepped in out of kindness. Somewhere deep inside, I still expected my mother's perfume to drift through the doorway, or my father's voice to thunder. Wait for me. But nothing came. Just the hum of the organ and the ache in my chest. A few hours earlier, I had checked my phone expecting a change of heart. Instead, I'd seen the text 8 cold words that gutted me. We won't come. This wedding is a disgrace. Beneath it, my sister Lily had posted a picture of them on a yacht, crystal glasses, raised high her caption, reading celebrating life's true milestones. Their smiles were flawless, their skin glowing under the sun, and for the first time in my life, I understood just how small they wanted me to feel. They hadn't merely declined, they'd celebrated my exclusion. My humiliation was their entertainment. I had stared at the screen until the letters blurred my hands, trembling. My best friend Maya had seen the look on my face and snatched the phone gently away. Forget them, she'd said, her voice fierce. They don't deserve to watch you walk. I had nodded, even smiled, pretending to agree. But the truth was, I wanted nothing more than for them to see me, to witness this moment, and finally, after 33 years, to be proud. As the organ swelled and the guests rose to their feet, I took a deep breath and lifted my chin. My gown rustled softly as I moved forward, the silk brushing against my legs. The light from the stained glass windows painted streaks of blue and crimson across the aisle. To anyone else, it might have looked heavenly. To me, it felt like walking through the ruins of an old dream. Richard and Elaine Henderson had built their lives around appearances. My father had been a lawyer for 40 years, the kind of man who measured worth by headlines and handshakes. My mother, a figure in every San Diego charity gala, believed reputation was a woman's greatest armor. Together, they had perfected the art of looking flawless. And Lily, my little sister, the prodigy pianist, the golden daughter, was their masterpiece. From the moment she touched her first piano key, their world began to orbit around her. I was the background noise, the practical one, the responsible child. Invisible except when needed for applause. My father once said at a dinner party, Lily was born to shine. Clara just prefers staying in the shadows. I had smiled politely while my insides twisted. What he didn't understand was that I didn't prefer the shadows. They were simply all that was left for me. As I walked, I thought of those years of birthdays, spent alone, of dinners where conversation revolved around Lily's latest performance, of the quiet resentment that had built inside me like sediment. I had spent my 20s building something of my own, a landscape architecture firm that turned barren lots into green sanctuaries. My work had been featured in magazines, my designs awarded by the city. But when I told my parents about my first major project, my father only said, "Well, it's not exactly Carnegie Hall, is it?" My mother had smiled absently and asked if I'd seen Lily's latest interview. That was the last time I tried to impress them. Now standing in the glow of the altar, I felt all those years pressing down on me, the endless striving, the quiet ache of never being enough. My throat tightened, but I refused to let the tears fall. Not today. Today I would stand tall even if no one clapped for me. Ethan waited at the end of the aisle, his posture calm, his eyes steady on mine. There was something in his expression, reassurance, maybe even pride, that anchored me. He looked at me as though nothing in the world could diminish this moment. For a heartbeat, I wondered if he knew. If he had seen the photos, if he understood the depth of the betrayal. But when I reached him, he simply took my hand, his fingers warm and sure. "Do you still want this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible beneath the music. He smiled, a slow, unshakable smile that reached his eyes. "More than ever," he said. The officiant began to speak, his voice echoing through the high ceilings. Words about love, endurance, and trust, words that felt fragile against the weight of what I had lost. My friends sat in the front pews, their faces soft with sympathy. I tried to focus on them, on the kindness in their eyes, but my gaze kept flickering to the empty seats beyond. Those polished wood surfaces gleamed under the light like silent witnesses to my abandonment. Somewhere outside, a gull cried, its voice cutting through the stillness. I drew a slow breath and held it, reminding myself that I wasn't broken. Not yet. The air was thick with incense, with the faint hum of the organ and the rhythmic thud of my own heart. I clung to Ethan's hand like an anchor. His thumb brushed against my knuckles in small grounding circles. It was enough to keep me standing. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A group of people slipped quietly through the back doors, 3 men and 2 women each, carrying cameras and equipment. One adjusted a tripod, another whispered into a headset. My stomach tightened. The red light on one of the cameras blinked to life. My pulse quickened. I turned slightly toward Ethan, confusion stirring in my chest. "What's going on?" I murmured. He didn't look away from me. His smile remained soft, calm. "You'll see," he said quietly. The officiant's voice continued, unaware of the new presence. The guests shifted in their seats, some curious, others too polite to stare. I glanced again at the camera, the lens pointed directly at us, capturing every detail. The ivory of my gown, the tremor in my hands, the faint flicker of surprise that I couldn't quite hide. "Ethan," I whispered again, "why are they here?" He squeezed my hand, eyes locked on mine. "Because you deserve to be seen." The words hung between us, puzzling and powerful. Before I could ask more, the camera light blinked again, brighter this time. Somewhere far beyond this church, televisions were turning on. A live broadcast was beginning. The officiant asked us to recite our vows. My voice shook at first, but I found my rhythm, my courage woven between each word. I spoke of love, of patience, of building something together. And though my hands trembled, I didn't falter. The lens captured it all, the pain, the strength, the silent defiance. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the chapel and the ghosts of those who refused to come, I realized something. My parents could miss this. They could choose silence. They could toast my absence from a yacht. But they couldn't erase what the world was about to see. Because as Ethan slipped the ring onto my finger, the camera zoomed in, broadcasting our vows live on national television. Somewhere on that yacht, I imagined my mother's glass slipping from her hand, the shimmer of champagne falling into the sea. My father's face tightening, my sister's perfect smile faltering. I could almost hear it, the sound of their pride cracking. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything began to turn. And as I stood beneath the vaulted ceiling, bathed in golden light, a quiet thought passed through me: the world might finally see me, even if my family never would. The call came on a quiet Thursday evening, just as the sun dipped behind the San Diego hills, painting the windows of Clara's apartment in muted gold. She was sketching the outline of a coastal resort proposal when her phone lit up. The name on the screen froze her breath. Elaine Henderson. Her mother hadn't called since that final argument months ago, the one that ended with the words, "You're embarrassing this family." For a heartbeat, Clara considered letting it ring out. But curiosity, that cruel and familiar pull, made her swipe the screen. Clara Elaine began, her tone clipped and deliberate, as though rehearsed. "We've discussed it, and your father and I won't be attending the wedding." The words landed like glass shattering. Clara blinked, pen still in hand, unable to process what she'd just heard. "You're not coming?" she asked softly, disbelief tightening her chest. "Mom, it's my wedding." Elaine exhaled, the sound strained but resolute. "Your father feels it wouldn't reflect well on us. Marrying a man you barely know from a background we don't approve of, it's a mistake." "People talk, Clara. You don't understand how reputation works in this world." Something inside her snapped. "I understand more than you think," she said quietly. "I just don't worship it." There was silence, thick, suffocating, before Elaine spoke again, colder now. "You've always been dramatic. This is why your father and I worry. We tried to raise you better than this. You're marrying beneath you, and we can't attach our name to it." Attach our name. The phrase dug under her skin. They didn't see her love, her work, her years of struggle. They saw a label, a reflection of themselves. "Is this about Ethan or about control?" she asked, her voice trembling now. "Don't be childish," Elaine snapped. "You've chosen this path. We'll let you walk it alone." The line went dead. For a long moment, Clara sat motionless, staring at the pattern of sunlight fading across the floor. Alone. The word echoed louder than her mother's voice. Later that night, she called her sister, hoping foolishly for understanding. Lily answered on the second ring, her voice bright and effortless. "Hey, superstar architect. Big day coming up, huh?" Clara forced a small laugh. "Yeah, I guess. I wanted to talk about Mom and Dad." "Oh, I already know," Lily interrupted, her tone casual. "They're not coming. Honestly, I don't blame them." Clara froze. "You what?" Lily sighed. "Come on, Clara. You're rushing this. Marrying someone they've never met, with no family blessing in some tiny chapel. It's not exactly the kind of thing people expect from a Henderson." There it was again. The family name, always heavier than love, heavier than truth. "So my happiness is less important than what people think." "Don't twist it," Lily said. "It's about standards. You know how Dad is. He built everything we have from nothing. You can't just throw that away because of feelings." Clara's hands tightened around the phone. "You sound just like them." "Well," Lily replied coolly, "maybe that's why I've never been the disappointment." The words hit like a slap. Clara inhaled sharply, the room spinning for a second. She wanted to scream, to tell Lily how cruel she sounded, how shallow. Instead, she hung up before her voice could break. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She sank into the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. For a moment, she wished she could be a child again, before expectations became walls, before love came with terms, and image became a prison. Ethan found her there an hour later, the lights off, her phone face down on the coffee table. "What happened?" he asked, gently crouching beside her. She shook her head, voice hollow. "They're not coming, none of them. Apparently I'm a disgrace." He didn't speak at first, just reached for her hand, tracing small circles over her skin. "You're not a disgrace," he said finally. "You're their mirror, and they don't like what they see." Clara looked up at him, her throat tight. "I wanted them there, Ethan. I wanted to believe they could change." "People don't change when the truth makes them uncomfortable," he said softly. "They change when silence costs them too much to bear." His words settled deep inside her, quiet but sharp. She leaned into him, letting his calm steady her heartbeat. "Then, maybe," she whispered, "this silence will be my gift to them." Over the next week, Clara moved through the wedding preparations with mechanical precision. She adjusted the seating chart, 3 empty chairs where her parents and sister were meant to sit. She emailed the florist, reminding them to add white calla lilies, her grandmother's favorite. When the bridal boutique asked if her mother would be attending the final fitting, Clara simply smiled and said she won't be able to make it. At night, though, the cracks showed. Lying in bed, she replayed her father's silence, her mother's dismissal, Lily's smug tone. Every rejection replayed like a song she couldn't turn off. But each morning she rose dressed and kept going. Maya, her maid of honor, noticed the shift. "You're too calm," she said one afternoon, as they reviewed the final vendor list. "That's not a good sign." Clara smiled faintly. "I'm just saving the crying for later." Maya frowned. "You don't have to be strong all the time." Clara's gaze drifted to the window, to the city skyline she'd helped design. "I'm not being strong," she said softly. "I'm just refusing to break where they expect me to." 3 nights before the wedding, she received another message. Not a call this time, just a text from her father. "We've made our decision. Don't embarrass yourself further. We wish you well, but you're on your own." Clara stared at the screen for a long while, her reflection faint in the glass. The words should have hurt, but instead they felt final. Like a verdict she had already accepted. She typed out 3 words, paused, then deleted them. She didn't owe them an explanation. Not anymore. The next morning, she took a long drive down the coast alone. The Pacific stretched endlessly beside her, waves crashing like applause she didn't feel she deserved. She stopped at a small overlook, the wind tugging her hair loose, and whispered, to no one in particular, "I'll still walk down that aisle." The vow wasn't just for Ethan anymore. It was for the girl she used to be, the one who sat in the corner during Lily's birthday parties, the one who studied under dim light while her parents traveled for piano recitals. That girl had waited a lifetime for permission to belong. Now she didn't need permission. When she returned home, Ethan was waiting with dinner takeout, sushi, her favorite. He smiled, lifting his glass. "To new beginnings." She clinked his glass softly, managing a small smile. "To walking alone when we have to." That night she stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker like fireflies. Her parents' words still echoed in her mind, but for the first time they didn't hollow her out. They hardened her resolve. She imagined the chapel, the soft music, the rows of flowers. The empty seats in the front row no longer symbolized rejection. They were a declaration, a reminder that she'd built this life without their applause. As she turned from the window, her phone buzzed again. A message from Maya. "Everything's set. You'll look stunning, even if half the city doesn't deserve to see it." Clara smiled, typing back, "They'll see it anyway." She put her phone down, her reflection framed by the darkened glass. For a long moment she studied herself, not the daughter they dismissed, not the shadow they ignored, but the woman she had become. Strong, unapologetic, ready. Outside the night deepened. The world around her slept, but Clara lay awake, her thoughts sharp and steady. The ache was still there, yes, but it no longer ruled her. Tomorrow she would send out the final seating plan, confirm the catering, and pick up her gown. And when the day came, she would walk that aisle, no matter how many chairs stood empty. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show up when no one expects you to. The morning of the wedding dawned calm and golden. The kind of sunlight that makes even silence look forgiving. Clara woke early, long before the makeup artist was scheduled to arrive. She stood by the window, watching the soft light spill across the San Diego harbor, the water catching every hue of dawn. The city looked peaceful, unaware that her heart wasn't. She pressed a hand to her chest and whispered to herself, "This is still my day." Downstairs, the small team of florists moved quietly through the venue, filling the chapel with the scent of white lilies and pale roses. The soft hum of preparation felt almost sacred. Clara arrived at the chapel just after 8, her gown draped carefully across her arm, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The space was breathtaking, rows of white chairs lined in symmetry, candles flickering beneath the stained glass windows. It was everything she had imagined as a girl, except for one thing, the absence that filled the air. When she reached the altar, she stopped. The seats marked reserved Henderson family were empty, untouched, their small name cards resting stiffly against the white linen. For a moment, her throat tightened. She could picture her mother sitting there, her father stiff in his suit, Lily adjusting her perfect curls. She could almost hear their polite applause. But they weren't there. They had chosen to turn their backs on her, and this, the quiet, was their signature. Maya entered behind her carrying a bouquet of lilies wrapped in ivory silk. "You look like you're about to pass out," she teased softly. "I might," Clara said with a weak laugh. "It's surreal." Maya's gaze followed hers to the empty seats. She hesitated. "Do you want to move those signs? Maybe it'll hurt less if no." Clara interrupted gently. "They stay. Let them be reminders." Maya nodded understanding. "Then let's make the rest of the room forget they were ever supposed to be here." The hair and makeup team arrived soon after, bustling around Clara with practiced precision. Powder brushed across her cheeks, pins slid into her dark hair, the veil fastened just so. Through it all, she remained silent, her thoughts drifting like the morning light. When the stylist stepped back and handed her the mirror, Clara hardly recognized the reflection. The woman looking back at her wasn't the girl who used to cry behind closed doors or beg for her father's approval. This woman looked calm, sculpted, ready. "Perfect," the stylist murmured. Clara smiled faintly. "No," she said. "Just enough." By noon, the guests began arriving. Friends from her firm, a few college classmates, neighbors who had seen her fight her way through long nights at the drafting board. They filled the space with warmth and chatter, their laughter echoing softly through the chapel. Each greeting, each hug chipped away at her loneliness. When she peeked out from behind the curtain, she saw Ethan standing near the altar, speaking with the officiant. He looked elegant, his dark suit pressed perfectly, his tie, the same shade of navy as the sea. But it wasn't his wealth or the calm authority in his posture that struck her, it was the way he waited. Patient, unwavering. The steadiness of a man who had chosen her not for who she might become, but for who she already was. At precisely 2 o'clock, the organist began to play. The melody filled the chapel like a tide rising against the shore. Maya took her hand. "Ready?" Clara exhaled slowly. "Yes." The doors opened. A hush rippled through the crowd. She stepped forward. Each click of her heel against the marble echoed through the vaulted space, sharp and haunting. The air smelled of roses and candle wax. She kept her chin high, though her eyes stung. For a fleeting second, she imagined her mother watching from the shadows, her father adjusting his tie, her sister smirking in quiet superiority. But the vision dissolved like smoke, replaced by the truth they weren't there. And she was still standing. Halfway down the aisle, a single tear escaped. She let it. It wasn't weakness, it was release. When she reached Ethan, he took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, grounding her in the moment. "You're breathtaking," he whispered. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice trembling just enough to betray her heart. The officiant began to speak, his voice deep, and steady words of unity and promise filling the air. Clara's eyes flicked once more to the front row, still empty. And yet the silence didn't crush her this time. It framed her. As the ceremony unfolded, Clara's mind drifted briefly to the night before, to the last-minute text she'd sent her mother. "I'll be walking down the aisle tomorrow. Whether or not you come, I hope you'll remember what you're missing." No reply had come. Not a word, not even a punctuation mark. The officiant's voice drew her back. "Clara, do you take Ethan Caldwell to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Her lips curved into a soft, defiant smile. "I do." When Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, the world stilled. The small group of guests applauded, the sound gentle but heartfelt. Maya was crying quietly in the front row, dabbing at her mascara with a tissue. The photographer moved around them, capturing the moment, the grace, the silence, the strength. Then something strange happened. As the applause died down, the heavy chapel doors opened again. Clara turned startled, but instead of familiar faces, she saw 3 camera operators walking briskly inside. Behind them followed a young woman with a headset and a press badge clipped to her blazer. Maya frowned. "What the hell?" The woman whispered something to her crew. Red recording lights flicked on. The cameraman aimed directly at the altar. Clara's pulse spiked. She turned to Ethan, confusion flashing in her eyes. "What's going on?" He squeezed her hand lightly. "You'll see." The officiant paused mid-sentence, unsure how to proceed. The guests exchanged murmurs. The cameras adjusted angles, one focusing on Clara's face, another on Ethan's hand resting over hers. "Ethan," she whispered urgently, "why are they here?" He looked at her, calm as ever. "Because you deserve to be seen, Clara. Not hidden, not erased." The realization hit her slowly, like dawn breaking. He had done this. He had invited them. Her heart raced, not from panic now, but from something far larger, a dawning comprehension of what this meant. All her life she had been told to stay quiet, to stay small, to avoid embarrassment. And here she was, her wedding broadcast for the world to witness. The officiant cleared his throat, resuming the ceremony. The cameras moved closer. Flashbulbs flickered. Clara's veil glowed beneath the sudden brightness, her skin lit in soft gold. She could almost hear her parents' voices in her mind. A disgrace. But as she looked into Ethan's eyes, she realized something extraordinary. This wasn't disgrace. This was reclamation. The vows continued. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each word. "I vow to walk beside you," she said, "through storms and silence, through loss and triumph. I vow to never let fear write my story again." Ethan's gaze softened. When he spoke his vows, the entire room seemed to breathe with him. "I vow to protect your peace," he said, "simply, even from the ghosts of your past." When the officiant finally declared them husband and wife, applause erupted. The sound was fuller this time, echoing off the walls like thunder. Clara turned slightly, her veil lifting as the camera zoomed in. She smiled, not for the audience, not for her absent family, but for herself. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by curiosity as word spread about the mystery wedding with the billionaire groom. By the time Clara and Ethan stepped out into the sunlight, reporters were already clustered near the gates. Flashing lights burst around them, microphones rose like spears. "Mrs. Caldwell, how does it feel?" one called. Clara met the camera's lens head-on, her expression calm, her voice steady. "It feels like freedom." That night, as they returned to their apartment, the city felt different, charged alive. Clara's phone buzzed, incessantly missed calls, social media tags, trending headlines. She didn't open any of them. Not yet. She sat on the couch in her wedding gown, the lace pooled around her feet. Ethan handed her a glass of champagne. "Are you angry with me?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "No, just overwhelmed." He sat beside her, his tone gentle. "I wanted the world to see what they refused to. That's all." Clara smiled faintly, lifting the glass, then let them watch. Outside, the harbor shimmered beneath the moonlight. Inside, her phone continued to buzz, 100 voices clamoring for her attention. Somewhere among them, one name would stand out before the night was over. But for now, she didn't look. She took another sip, leaned against Ethan's shoulder, and whispered, "I think this was the beginning of something they'll never forget." And for the first time in her life, the silence that followed felt like victory. The following morning, the world already knew her name. Clara woke to the sound of her phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. The glow of the screen cut through the dim light of dawn. Messages, emails, alerts, hundreds of them. Her stomach twisted as she scrolled through the notifications. News headlines filled the screen. Billionaire CEO marries unknown architect in private ceremony broadcast live. Mystery bride of Ethan Caldwell captivates America. There were clips of her walking down the aisle, her voice trembling as she spoke. Her vows the moment Ethan lifted her veil. Every second of what had been sacred was now public. Ethan emerged from the kitchen holding 2 mugs of coffee. "It's all over the news," he said, handing one to her. "You're trending." "I didn't think it would be this big," Clara whispered, scrolling through the footage of herself on national television. It was surreal. The camera angles, the captions, the commentary from strangers speculating about her life. Some praised her elegance, others questioned her past. Who was she before him, they asked. Ethan sat beside her, calm, almost amused. People love a story, he said simply, especially when it surprises them. Clara looked up at him, her brow furrowing. You knew this would happen. He didn't deny it. I did, he admitted. And I wanted it to, because for once they couldn't ignore you. She set the phone down, her pulse unsteady. You mean my parents? Ethan nodded slightly. They needed to see what they threw away. Clara stared at the coffee in her hands, the steam swirling in the quiet space. Part of her wanted to be angry that he'd exposed something so intimate. But beneath that, she felt something else: vindication. The same family who had deemed her a disgrace were now watching her become headline news. By noon, the messages began pouring in. Friends from college congratulated her coworkers, sent screenshots of the news coverage. Even distant relatives she hadn't heard from in years wrote things like, "So proud of you." But one message stood out, the one she hadn't expected to see. It came through the old family group chat she hadn't opened in months. The preview on her screen read only 4 words. "Where are you, Clara?" Her hand froze. She opened the chat. There they were, dozens of unread messages lighting up all at once. Her mother, her father, even Lily. From her father. "Why didn't you tell us who he really was?" From her mother. "How could you let us find out on TV?" "People are calling, we're being bombarded with questions." From Lily. "Wow. Guess I underestimated you." Clara stared at the words, her lips parting in disbelief. Of all the things they could have said, no congratulations, no apology, just panic. Panic that their pride had been bruised. Ethan watched her expression darken. "Let me guess," he said softly. "They want back in." Clara nodded slowly. "They don't even realize what this means to them. Not me, just them." Her phone buzzed again. Her father's latest message appeared. "You owe us an explanation." She exhaled through her nose, her fingers trembling slightly. Then she typed nothing. Instead, she scrolled up, found the message that started it all, the one where they told her they wouldn't attend, and pressed her thumb gently over it. The words still stung. "This wedding is a disgrace." And now they were the ones begging for a response. Ethan leaned over, his voice low. "You don't have to answer." "I know," Clara said, "but I will." She tapped the screen once, hovering over the message. Then, with a faint smirk, she selected a single emoji, a small yellow face laughing. She hit send. For a moment, the sound of the sent message was the only noise in the room. Then she set her phone aside, picked up her coffee, and took a slow sip. "That's it?" Ethan asked, smiling slightly. "That's all they get," she replied. "I spent years explaining myself to people who never listened. Now they can interpret silence." Within minutes, her phone lit up again, her mother calling, her father texting, the chat flooding with unanswered questions. Clara ignored it all. The sound of notifications became background noise, meaningless and distant. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his voice gentle. "You did the right thing." She looked up at him, her eyes steady. "No," she said. "I did the final thing." Later that afternoon, the news cycle intensified. A clip from the ceremony was replayed on every network, complete with commentary about Ethan Caldwell's mysterious bride. Analysts speculated about her background, her career, her humble upbringing. Someone had even dug up her university thesis, showcasing her architectural work on sustainable communities. Ironically, the same traits that her family had dismissed as insignificant were now being celebrated on a national stage. By evening, the apartment felt quieter. Ethan had gone to take a business call, and Clara sat alone on the couch, scrolling through the comments under a news post. "She's stunning. She must be brilliant if he married her. Her parents must be so proud." She almost laughed at that last one. Proud. The word had become a ghost she'd stopped chasing years ago. Her phone buzzed again, this time a video call. Her mother. Clara hesitated, thumb hovering over the accept button. Then she pressed it. Elaine's face appeared perfectly framed as though she had rehearsed even this. But her eyes looked unsettled, red around the edges. "Clara," she breathed. "What were you thinking? Why didn't you tell us we could have?" "You could have what?" Clara interrupted, her voice calm but sharp. "Shown up for the cameras. You made your choice, Mom. You said it would embarrass the family." Elaine flinched. "We didn't mean it like that. We just didn't know who he really was." "That's the problem," Clara said softly. "You never asked." Her mother's lips trembled. "Your father, he's devastated. People are calling him a fool. We just—" Clara cut her off again, her tone firm. "This isn't about you anymore. It never should have been." Elaine's voice cracked. "You don't understand how much this hurts." Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. "I do. I lived it." She ended the call before her mother could reply. For a long while she sat in silence, the faint hum of the city filtering through the window. The ache in her chest wasn't rage anymore, it was release. Years of seeking approval, of shrinking herself to fit their image, had finally burned away. When Ethan returned, she was still sitting there, her phone face down on the coffee table. "They called," he guessed. "Yes," she said simply. "And for the first time, I didn't answer for them. I answered for me." He smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "So what now, Mrs. Caldwell?" Clara turned toward him, her expression soft but resolute. "Now I build something they can't take credit for." The evening deepened, and for the first time in months she felt no weight pressing against her chest. The world might still talk about her, dissect her choices, label her as the architect who married a billionaire. But those voices didn't matter. Somewhere on a yacht or behind closed doors, her parents were probably still fuming, her sister, scrolling through endless headlines, drowning in envy and confusion. And yet Clara felt nothing but calm. She poured herself another glass of wine and stood by the window, the city glittering below. The reflection in the glass caught her eye. A woman in a white dress, her posture strong, her eyes steady. She raised her glass slightly, a quiet toast to herself. "To the girl they called a disgrace," she whispered. "And the woman who proved them wrong." The phone buzzed again on the table. She didn't look back. Instead, she turned toward Ethan and said with a smile that was both weary and free, "Let's watch the sunset. The world can wait." Outside, the last streaks of light slipped beyond the horizon. Inside, Clara exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. She didn't need to fight anymore. The war was already won. The morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, spilling across the apartment like a quiet blessing. Clara stirred awake to the faint murmur of the television in the living room. She reached for her phone, first habit, reflex, survival. The screen exploded with notifications. Every headline bore her name. From Disgrace to Darling, the Henderson daughter who married a billionaire. America's new obsession, the bride who walked alone. Who is Clara Caldwell? Her pulse quickened. She scrolled, reading snippets from interviews. She hadn't given opinion pieces, dissecting her every gesture at the altar, her expression, her tears. Strangers online debated whether she had planned the humble to Hollywood transformation. Others called her the face of quiet revenge. She tossed the phone aside and walked barefoot to the living room. Ethan sat on the couch, coffee in hand, watching a morning show replaying clips from their wedding. The host's voice was bright and cheerful. "She's the architect who stole America's heart," the host said, "and the daughter whose parents missed the biggest day of her life." Tragic or poetic? Ethan muted the sound when she entered. "They're obsessed," he said lightly. Clara gave a small, humorless smile. "They always love a redemption arc." On screen, her own face appeared, eyes shining beneath her veil, lips trembling as she said, "I do." It felt strange watching herself from the outside. She looked composed, radiant even, but she remembered the shaking beneath her ribs, the weight of every step down that aisle. Ethan stood and crossed the room, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded, though her throat felt tight. "Just surreal." But then her phone buzzed again, this time the family group chat she had muted weeks ago. The message preview flashed. "Where are you? We need to talk." Her heart stopped. She unlocked the screen. There it was, her father's message, cold and urgent. Beneath it, her mother's. "Why didn't you tell us who he was?" And Lily's simple but barbed guess, "You finally did something worth watching." Clara stared at the words until they blurred. Then she laughed, a sharp, exhausted sound. "They don't even pretend to care," she said softly. Ethan watched her face. "They're embarrassed. They'll twist this into your fault, too." Clara's phone buzzed again. "Call us back. We can fix this." Fix this? She shook her head in disbelief. They hadn't come to her wedding, hadn't sent a single blessing, and now they wanted to fix their image. Ethan took the phone gently from her hands and set it down. "You don't owe them anything." But something inside her burned a mixture of anger and clarity. "No," she said quietly. "I don't owe them, but I want them to know I see them for what they are." She picked the phone back up, scrolled through the messages again, and typed nothing. Instead, she opened the emoji tab, found the one she wanted, the laughing face, and hit send. For a moment, she felt a surge of adrenaline. Then stillness. Ethan arched a brow. "That's it," Clara smiled, faintly leaning back on the couch. "That's all the explanation they deserve." Her phone buzzed again seconds later, calls, messages, panic. She ignored them all, muting the thread entirely. "They're probably on that yacht right now, trying to figure out how to spin this," she said dryly. Ethan chuckled. "Let them drown in their own PR." The phone kept vibrating on the table. Clara let it. She poured herself coffee, took a slow sip, and exhaled. The warmth settled deep in her chest, steady and grounding. By afternoon, the media frenzy had reached its peak. News segments replayed her story endlessly, juxtaposing it against images of her father, the once respected attorney, and her sister, the darling pianist. Sources confirm estranged relationship, parents absent from ceremony, a tale of family betrayal and poetic justice. When the anchor mentioned her father's name, the camera cut to an old photo of him in a tuxedo, smiling stiffly beside Elaine. For the first time, Clara didn't feel small looking at that image. She felt distance, power. At lunchtime, Maya called. "Girl, you broke the internet," she said, her voice somewhere between awe and laughter. "Your wedding has 30 million views. I can't tell if people love you or just love watching your parents squirm." Clara laughed softly. "Maybe both." Maya's tone softened. "You okay?" "Really, I'm fine," Clara said, meaning it this time. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel guilty." "I don't." "You shouldn't," Maya said firmly. "They did this to themselves." As they talked, Ethan scrolled through another wave of articles, half grinning. "Oh, here's my favorite headline," he said, reading aloud. "When Karma Wears White." Clara snorted. "Catchy." He set the phone down, serious again. "I know this isn't the wedding day you imagined, but I want you to know it's the one the world needed to see." She looked at him, really looked at him. "You turned my pain into something visible." "I just gave the truth a stage," he said simply. That night, the apartment felt too quiet. The city lights flickered through the windows, reflecting off the glass of unfinished champagne from the night before. Clara sat, curled on the couch, scrolling aimlessly through the online storm she had become. For every message of admiration, there were cruel ones too. She married for money. She planned the whole thing. No wonder her parents stayed away. She read them all. Then she closed her phone and set it face down. The sound of rain began tapping against the windows. Ethan joined her, pulling her close. "They'll forget by next week," he said. "I don't want them to forget," she murmured. "I want them to remember who they left behind." He tilted her chin up, his voice low. "Then you've already won." The next morning, she woke to a new flood of coverage. But this time, the headlines were different. "The Bride Who Stood Alone." "Strength in Silence, How One Woman Redefined Grace." The tone had shifted from spectacle to admiration. There was even a clip of a talk show panel discussing her story. A journalist said, "There's something universal about her courage. It's not just about revenge, it's about dignity." Clara smiled faintly as she watched tears prickling her eyes. Dignity. That was the word she'd been searching for all her life. At that same moment, miles away on that familiar yacht, her parents were facing the kind of spotlight they had always feared. Elaine's phone rang non-stop. Reporters demanded comments, friends texted condolences, thinly veiled as gossip. Richard, humiliated, smashed his phone on the deck when a headline read Henderson family snubs daughter's billionaire wedding. Their perfect image was unraveling strand by strand. Meanwhile, Lily sat in her cabin scrolling through the same footage. Everyone else was watching her sister's vows, her poise the roar of applause. For the first time in her life, Lily felt invisible. Back in the apartment, Clara's phone buzzed again. Another message from her father. "You've made us a laughingstock. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Clara stared at the text for a long time, then let out a quiet, breathy laugh. "Yeah," she whispered to herself. "I finally told the truth." She deleted the message and tossed the phone onto the couch. Ethan watched her admiration flickering behind his calm smile. "What now?" he asked. Clara walked to the window, watching the city pulse beneath the morning light. "Now," she said, "I stop proving and start living." Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, steady, unapologetic. For years she had begged her family to see her. Now the entire world did. She turned her smile quiet but triumphant. "The sweetest revenge isn't shouting," she said softly. "It's letting your peace make the loudest noise." Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke apart and the sun returned, washing the city in gold once more. It was the same light as the morning of her wedding, but this time it belonged to her. The apartment was quiet again. The storm had passed, at least on the surface. Clara sat by the window that afternoon, legs folded under her, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside her. The world outside seemed to move on, cars honking faintly below the steady rhythm of a normal day returning. But inside her chest there was still that hollow echo. Ethan was on a conference call in the next room. His voice carried confidence, calm authority, the tone of a man who was in control. Clara envied that steadiness. For her, control had always been an illusion. Her phone lay face down on the table, silent now after the chaos of the past week. No more calls from her parents. No new headlines about the billionaire's bride. The noise had faded, leaving only the aftertaste of everything she'd survived. She picked up the tea, took a sip, then set it down again. The bouquet from the wedding, now wilted, sat in a vase near the corner. The petals curled inward like a memory collapsing on itself. She reached out and touched one, her fingertips brushing the dryness. It fell soundlessly to the floor. That simple motion pulled something inside her open. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to remember, not the wedding, not the fame, but the little girl she had once been, the one who had longed for the same parents who now feared her success. She closed her eyes. It started with a birthday. She must have been 10. The memory came in fragments, the sound of laughter downstairs, the scent of chocolate frosting, her sister's high-pitched giggle echoing through the hall. The Henderson house had been filled with music that day. Lily's 6th birthday. Clara had spent the morning drawing a picture for her, a watercolor of the two of them on the piano bench, their hands touching the same keys. She had wrapped it in pink paper, tied it with yarn. She'd waited at the top of the stairs, clutching it tight. When she went down, the living room sparkled streamers, guests, a giant cake shaped like a grand piano. Her mother glided through the room in pearls, her father in his best suit. Everyone smiled. Everyone but her. She tried to hand the gift to her sister, but Elaine's hand stopped her. "Not now, sweetie," her mother whispered. "Let's not steal Lily's moment." Clara remembered nodding, stepping back into the shadow of the staircase, gift still in hand. Hours later, when the guests had gone and the house quieted, she crept to her room and placed the gift on her desk. Then she lit the single candle from the kitchen drawer and whispered, "Happy birthday, me," before blowing it out. The memory faded as quickly as it came, but the ache it left was sharp. That night had been her first lesson in invisibility. Clara blinked hard, forcing herself to breathe. The room around her blurred slightly, the edges softening. Another memory surfaced, her college graduation. She had been 22, proud, standing in her cap and gown, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. There were cheers all around, parents waving flowers, families holding up cameras, but no one for her. Her parents were in Chicago with Lily for a concert. They had sent a card that read, "Congratulations on your little award." Little award. She had placed it in a drawer and never opened it again. That night she had celebrated alone, with a cheap bottle of sparkling cider, sitting by the dorm window and telling herself that maybe success was its own company. She had believed it then. She didn't anymore. Her father's voice from those years echoed in her head. A Henderson must always look the part. A cheap life is a shameful one. He'd said it after she bought a used car with her own savings. She'd thought he'd be proud of her independence. Instead, he'd said, "You make us look small." Now, watching the sunlight stretch across the living room floor, she finally understood. He hadn't been protecting their reputation. He had been protecting his own insecurity. She whispered it aloud, testing the words. He was ashamed of himself. Ethan's voice drifted in from the other room, steady and warm. She could hear him laughing with someone on the call. That sound grounded her. It reminded her that not every man in her life demanded to be right. Some simply chose to be kind. When his call ended, he appeared in the doorway. "You've been quiet all morning," he said gently. "Wanna go out? We could get lunch by the marina." Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe later. I'm remembering things." He crossed the room, crouched beside her chair, and took her hand. "The bad things, the true things," she said softly. "Sometimes they're both." He nodded, saying nothing more, and kissed her knuckles before heading toward the kitchen. His quiet presence gave her space to keep remembering. She thought about her mother Elaine, elegant, polite, always composed. She used to believe her mother's silence was cruelty. But now, older and wiser, she wondered if it was fear. Fear of losing the fragile perfection she had built around herself. Fear of love that wasn't polished or safe. Clara rose from the chair, walked to her bookshelf, and pulled down an old photo album she hadn't opened in years. The pages crackled softly. There were pictures of piano recitals, gayless family portraits, where everyone smiled except her. She stopped at one, her father's arm wrapped around Lily's shoulder. Her mother's standing behind them, Clara, off to the side, half cut from the frame. She stared at that picture for a long time before whispering, "You can't crop me out anymore." Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Maya. "How's your piece today?" Clara typed back, getting clearer. That evening she took a long walk by the harbor. The air was crisp, tinged with salt. She watched the waves roll in, each one dissolving neatly into the next. For years she had tried to hold back the tide, to be calm, acceptable, small. Now she let the sea wash over her, even if only in metaphor. When she returned home, Ethan was reading on the couch. She joined him, curling up beside him. After a moment she said, "Do you think people like my parents ever change?" He looked thoughtful sometimes. "But usually people don't change until it costs them too much to stay the same." She nodded. "Then maybe they'll change someday. Or maybe they won't. Either way, I'll still be okay." He brushed her hair away from her face. "You already are." Later, when he had gone to bed, Clara sat alone with her journal open. She wrote slowly, her handwriting. "Calm, deliberate forgiveness doesn't mean they win. It means I stop carrying them." She closed the book and looked around the apartment, the space she had built herself, the light she had chosen, the peace she had earned. Her parents had built their legacy out of fear. She would build hers out of freedom. She whispered into the quiet room, "I forgive you," and felt the words settle deep inside her chest. The tears that came weren't bitter. They were cleansing. Ethan appeared in the doorway again, sleepy and barefoot. "You're still up," he murmured. "Just finishing something," she said, smiling faintly. He came closer, wrapping her in a hug from behind. "You're allowed to rest, you know." "I know," she whispered, leaning into him. "I think I finally can." Outside, the city shimmered under the night sky. The moonlight rippled across the ocean in long, trembling bands of silver. For the first time in her life, Clara didn't feel like she was waiting for her family to love her right. She had stopped waiting altogether. She reached for Ethan's hand and said quietly, "I think I'm ready to stop remembering just to hurt." He kissed the top of her head. "Then remember to heal." She smiled against his chest, breathing in the scent of home. And in the stillness of that moment, the past finally loosened its grip. It started with a headline. Clara was in her office going over blueprints for a new public park project when her assistant burst through the door holding a tablet. "You should see this," she said breathlessly. Clara frowned, wiping graphite dust from her fingertips. "What is it?" Her assistant hesitated before handing her the screen. The headline was impossible to miss. "Golden Girl Falls from Grace Lily Henderson Walks Off Stage Mid-Performance." Beneath it, a still image froze her sister's face in mid-sneer, her mouth open in fury, the microphone slipping from her hand. The caption read, "Pianist storms out after berating orchestra live on national broadcast." For a long moment, Clara just stared. The photo didn't look real. Lily, perfect Lily, golden-haired and perpetually adored, was trending for all the wrong reasons. The hashtags told the story: number, Golden Girl no more, number, stage meltdown, number, Henderson drama. Ethan walked in just then, loosening his tie, the faintest smile playing on his lips. So the universe finally found its balance. Clara shot him a look, half amused, half shocked. "Don't say that." He shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "Karma doesn't need an invitation. It just arrives on time." She wanted to disagree, to tell him that it wasn't right to take pleasure in someone else's downfall, but deep inside, a part of her trembled with the quiet satisfaction of poetic justice. By evening, the story had exploded. Every major network replayed the clip of Lily throwing her microphone and storming off stage during a televised performance. The orchestra's conductor looked stunned, the audience gasped audibly, and the video looped endlessly across social media. Commentators called it a career-ending tantrum. Someone posted a compilation of Lily's previous interviews, piecing together her arrogant remarks about lesser musicians and standards of class. The internet feasted. For once, Clara didn't check her family group chat. She knew exactly what would be waiting there. Chaos, denial, blame. That night, Ethan found her on the couch watching the clip again in silence. The sound was off, but she could still see the rage in her sister's eyes, the same look Lily used to give her whenever she dared to shine too brightly. "You don't have to watch it," Ethan said, sitting beside her. Clara's gaze stayed fixed on the screen. "I know. I never thought she'd self-destruct." Ethan's voice softened. "She's been building toward this for years. Perfection is exhausting, especially when it's a lie." Clara looked at him, a faint sadness crossing her face. "Do you think she ever hated me? Or was it just habit?" He reached for her hand. "Maybe she hated how free you were, even when you didn't feel it." The words lingered long after the television went dark. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. Clara opened it to find a courier holding an envelope addressed to Mrs. Clara Caldwell. Inside was an invitation to appear on a popular talk show, one that had already covered her wedding story months earlier. They wanted her to speak, to share her side of the Henderson family dynamic. The offer came with an absurd sum of money. She set the envelope down on the table and stared at it for a long moment. Maya called later that night, her voice buzzing with energy. "You have to do it," she said. "They humiliated you publicly. This is your turn." Clara twirled a pen between her fingers, thoughtful. "It's tempting." "It's justice," Maya insisted. "You'd own the narrative." Clara's tone was calm. "Or I'd just feed it, and I think it's had enough of me." Maya sighed, disappointed. "You're too classy for your own good." Clara smiled. "No, I'm just tired of performing pain for other people's entertainment." When she hung up, she turned to Ethan, who had been quietly listening. He met her eyes and said simply, "That's the answer right there." But the universe wasn't done testing her. The next evening, as Clara was watering the plants on their balcony, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then something in her chest stirred an old familiar instinct. She answered. Clara, the voice on the other end was trembling unmistakably familiar. It's me, Lily. For a second, the sound didn't register. Clara's grip on the watering can loosened slightly. Lily, please don't hang up, her sister said quickly. I didn't know who else to call. Clara leaned against the railing, eyes narrowing. You have plenty of people. Or you did. A shaky breath. Not anymore. Silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken things. I saw your performance, Clara said finally, her voice steady. I lost everything, Lily whispered. Sponsors, contracts. They all dropped me. The press won't stop. They've turned me into a villain. Clara almost laughed at the irony. That's what happens when the mask breaks. Don't do that, Lily said, her voice cracking. Don't talk to me like them. I made mistakes. Okay, I was jealous, Clara. You had everything, love, peace, the life I thought I was supposed to have. The confession caught her off guard. She didn't answer right away. Lily continued, her words tumbling over each other. You think it was easy being their favorite. Every note I played, every show I did, it wasn't for me. It was for Dad's pride, Mom's perfection. You rebelled and I followed orders. But we both ended up broken. Clara closed her eyes. You could have stopped hurting me. I know, Lily whispered. And I'm sorry. The two words hung in the air, fragile as glass. When Clara finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. We can't fix the past, but maybe you can stop running from it. On the other end, Lily sniffled. I don't know how. Start by sitting with it, Clara said quietly. That's how I did. Lily exhaled shakily. Thank you. Even if you don't mean it. I mean it, Clara said. But forgiveness doesn't mean we go back. She hung up gently before her resolve could waver. That night, Ethan found her staring at the city lights again. Was that your sister? He asked. Yes. Do you regret answering? Clara shook her head. No, I just didn't expect her to sound so human. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's her punishment. Clara looked down at her wedding ring, tracing the gold band with her thumb. For years I wanted them to see me suffer. Now I just want them to see me at peace. The following week, her inbox flooded again, this time with speaking invitations, sponsorships, features in women's magazines. People called her a voice of grace in a world of scandal. One headline even read, From Shadow to Spotlight, How Clara Caldwell Redefined Resilience. She accepted one invitation to deliver a keynote speech at a design conference in Austin. The topic, Building Beyond Survival. When she stepped onto that stage, the audience of hundreds rose to their feet. She smiled, poised and calm beneath the lights. Sometimes she began, we spend our whole lives trying to earn love from people too broken to give it. But love isn't something you win. It's something you create brick by brick, truth by truth. Applause thundered. Somewhere she hoped her sister was watching. Not to feel envy, but to see what freedom looked like. After the event, Clara walked outside into the Texas sunlight. The warmth hit her face and she tilted her head toward it, eyes closed. Ethan came up beside her, sliding his hand into hers. You don't feel sorry for her? He asked gently. Clara shook her head. No, I feel released. She turned toward him, her smile serene and certain. For years I thought revenge would taste like victory, but it tastes like peace. Ethan kissed her temple, the quiet pride in his touch, saying more than words ever could. The past had finally stopped chasing her. But peace, she knew, was never permanent. Somewhere deep inside, she could feel the faint stirring of another secret, something waiting just beyond the calm. And as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in molten gold, Clara whispered to herself, If the past calls again, I'll be ready to answer, but on my terms this time. The letter arrived on a gray morning in late October, tucked neatly between bills and advertisements. Clara almost missed it at first. It was the handwriting that stopped her, the slanted cursive she hadn't seen in over a decade. Elaine Henderson. Her breath caught. For a moment, she just stared at it, her coffee cooling in her hands. The envelope was cream-colored edges, slightly bent her name, written carefully across the center, Mrs. Clara Caldwell. Not Clara, not my daughter, but formal, polite, hesitant. Ethan came into the kitchen, still half asleep, tie loose around his neck.